The alarm clock rang at 5:30 a.m. in Cambridge, Massachusetts, but Grace Williams had already been awake for an hour. She'd spent the entire night tossing and turning in bed, anxious for the day that would change her life forever. After 3 intense years at Harvard Law School, balancing studies, motherhood and marriage, the moment had finally arrived to receive her diploma. Grace stood up quietly, trying not to wake Ethan, who was fast asleep beside her. She walked to the closet and took out the cream dress she had chosen especially for the occasion. Elegant, but not too flashy. While getting ready in the bathroom, she looked at her reflection in the mirror and smiled. At 32, she had achieved something that seemed impossible when she became pregnant with Tommy at 27, balancing motherhood with studying at one of the most prestigious law schools in the country. "Ethan, honey, it's time to wake up," she whispered, gently touching her husband's shoulder. "The ceremony is at 10, and we still need to drop Tommy off at his mother's house." Ethan mumbled something unintelligible and turned away. Grace sighed, used to his difficulty waking up early, especially on weekends. She went down to the kitchen of her house in Beacon Hill and prepared coffee, scrambled eggs and toast, the family's favorite breakfast. The aroma soon filled the house, and she heard Tommy's little footsteps coming down the stairs. "Mom, today is a special day," exclaimed the 5-year-old boy, running to hug her. His blonde hair was completely messy, and he was wearing the Spider-Man pajamas he insisted on wearing every night. "Yes, my love. Today, Mommy is going to receive a very important diploma, and Daddy will be there to see everything," said Grace, kissing her son's forehead while fixing his hair. Tommy sat down at the table and began to eat, chattering about the cartoons he had watched on TV. Grace looked at the clock. It was already 7:15, and Ethan still hadn't come down. She went back upstairs and found her husband in the shower. "Ethan, we're late. The ceremony starts in less than 3 hours and we still have to drop Tommy off." "Relax, Grace. We have plenty of time," he replied without any hurry. "Besides, these ceremonies always start late." Grace felt a pang in her chest. This was the most important day of her career, and Ethan seemed to be treating it like just another appointment. She went back to the kitchen, finished getting Tommy ready, and put his things in his backpack. When Ethan finally came downstairs, it was already 8 o'clock. "Dad, you're going to see Mom get her diploma," Tommy said excitedly. "Of course I'll go, champ," Ethan replied, but Grace noticed he seemed distracted, constantly fiddling with his cell phone. The drive to Ethan's mother's house was tense. Grace was trying to keep Tommy engaged in lively conversation in the back seat, but she could see her husband was growing increasingly restless. When they arrived at the home of Eleanor Williams, an elegant 65-year-old woman who lived in a mansion in Back Bay, Ethan barely got out of the car. "Grandma Eleanor," shouted Tommy, running into his grandmother's arms. "My beautiful grandson, today we're going to bake cookies while Mommy gets her diploma," said Eleanor, hugging the boy. She looked at Grace with a warm smile. "I'm so proud of you, darling. It's not easy graduating from Harvard as a mother." "Thank you, Eleanor, that means a lot to me," Grace replied, genuinely touched by her mother-in-law's support. Ethan honked impatiently from his car. "Grace, let's go. We're going to be late." The irony of the situation did not escape Grace's notice. He had spent the entire morning getting ready, and now he was in a hurry. She quickly said goodbye to Tommy and Eleanor and returned to the car. During the drive to Harvard, Ethan received a call. Grace only heard fragments of the conversation. "Seriously? Now? But Okay, I'm on my way." "Who was it?" Grace asked, although she already suspected the answer. "It was Rebecca. She's in labor. The baby is coming sooner than expected." Grace felt the world spin. "Ethan, you can't be serious. Today is my graduation. Grace is my sister. She needs me. You'll understand, won't you?" "Do you understand, Ethan? I've spent 3 years studying for this moment, 3 years sacrificing weekends, holidays, nights of sleep, and you want to abandon me on the most important day of my career because of a birth that isn't even yours? Don't be dramatic. It's just a ceremony. You're going to get your diploma anyway." Grace remained silent for the rest of the drive, feeling a mixture of anger and disappointment she had never experienced before. When they arrived at the Harvard campus, Ethan stopped the car in front of the auditorium. "Grace, I'm so sorry, but I have to go. Rebecca is alone in the hospital and Mom is with our son." "And her husband? Her sisters-in-law?" "She has a whole family, Ethan. You know David is traveling for work, and his parents are in Florida visiting Uncle Robert." Grace got out of the car without saying a word. She heard Ethan shout "good luck" before speeding off and disappearing down the busy Cambridge street. Alone in front of Harvard's imposing building, Grace took a deep breath and walked toward the auditorium. Entire families arrived excitedly, taking photos, hugging their graduates. Grace watched a mother adjusting her daughter's gown, a proud father holding a bouquet of flowers, grandparents smiling with tears in their eyes. She found her place in the graduation line and put on her gown and cap. Beside her, her classmate Jennifer stood beaming alongside her parents and boyfriend. "Grace, you did it. Where's Ethan?" Jennifer asked. "He had a family emergency," Grace replied, forcing a smile. When they entered the auditorium, Grace automatically searched for Ethan among the hundreds of faces in the audience. Her eyes scanned every row, every section, hoping to see her husband's familiar face. But all she found was an empty seat in the section reserved for family members. Throughout the ceremony, while the rector spoke about achievements and bright futures, Grace kept her eyes fixed on that empty chair. When her name was called, Grace Elizabeth Williams, Juris Doctor, magna cum laude, she ascended the stage. Applause echoed through the auditorium, but for Grace, the silence of that empty chair was palpable. She received her diploma, shook the rector's hand and smiled for the cameras, but inside she felt a profound emptiness. This should have been a moment of shared celebration. It was a place of mutual pride, of recognition for all the sacrifices she had made. Instead, she was completely alone at the most important moment of her professional life. After the ceremony, Grace took some photos with classmates and teachers, but her heart wasn't there. She checked her phone hoping for at least a message from Ethan, but there was nothing. Not a congratulations, not a sorry I wasn't there, not even an update on Rebecca. As she walked back home, Grace reflected on the past 3 years. How many times had she missed important events for Ethan because of her studies? How many times had she cancelled plans with friends to study for exams? How many nights had she spent awake writing legal articles while Ethan... Was he sleeping peacefully? And now, at the moment when all of this should be worthwhile, at the moment when she should be celebrating with the most important person in her life, she was alone on the streets of Boston, her diploma in the passenger seat, and a growing feeling that something fundamental had changed in her marriage. Grace arrived home in a taxi, but remained seated in the car for a few seconds, still processing the morning's events. Her Harvard diploma lay beside her, a symbol of years of dedication and sacrifice that now seemed tarnished by Ethan's absence. She took a deep breath, gathered her things, and went inside. The house was silent. Grace went upstairs to her room, took off her graduation gown and cap, and hung them carefully in the closet. She looked at the cream dress in the mirror and felt a pang of sadness. She had chosen that outfit, thinking about how proud Ethan would be to see her receive her diploma. Now it seemed only a reminder of her disappointment. She changed her clothes, putting on jeans and a comfortable blouse, and went down to the kitchen. She made a sandwich but could barely eat it. Her mind kept returning to that empty chair, to the look of pity she saw on the faces of some of her colleagues, to the feeling of abandonment that consumed her. Grace was washing the dishes when her cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Ethan. Her heart skipped a beat. Finally, he had remembered to ask how the ceremony went, maybe even apologize for not being there. She dried her hands and picked up her phone, but what she read left her completely stunned. "Grace, transfer $5,000 to Rebecca's account right now. It's our gift for the baby. She needs the money for hospital expenses and other things. Do it immediately." Grace read the message 3 times, unable to believe what she was seeing. There wasn't a single word about her graduation, not a congratulations, not a how was the ceremony, not even a sorry I wasn't there, just a cold, direct order to transfer $5,000. She sat at the kitchen table, still staring at her phone screen. The audacity of the message was astonishing. Not only had Ethan missed the most important day of his career, but now he was demanding that she pay for his absence. Literally. Grace knew her family's finances well. $5,000 wasn't a small amount for them. It was almost the amount she had saved working part-time during her last semester of college. It was the money she had saved for a small celebratory trip after graduation. More than that, the way Ethan had phrased the message deeply irritated her. "It's our gift for the baby," as if she had been involved in the decision, as if she should feel obligated to give an expensive gift to a sister-in-law who barely spoke to her. Grace had always had a cordial but distant relationship with Rebecca. Ethan's sister was 5 years younger and had always been spoiled by her parents. She had married David, an executive who traveled constantly for work and lived a comfortable life without ever having worked a single day. Rebecca had a habit of making subtly critical comments about Grace's choices, about her going back to school after having Tommy, about her neglecting her family because of college, about her being too ambitious for a mother. And now Ethan expected her to simply transfer $5,000 to Rebecca on the same day he had chosen his sister-in-law's delivery over his own wife's graduation. Grace felt a cold rage gripping her chest. She typed and deleted several different replies. First, a long message explaining how abandoned and hurt she felt. Then, a sarcastic response about his priorities. Finally, she decided on something simple and direct. "I'm neither the bank nor the child's father." She sent the message and immediately felt a dark satisfaction. It was the first time in years that she had responded to Ethan so directly and bluntly. The phone started ringing almost instantly. It was Ethan. Grace looked at the screen but didn't answer. He called again and again. After 20 consecutive calls, she hung up. Grace went upstairs to her room and began packing a small bag. She didn't know exactly what she was doing, but she knew she couldn't stay in that house at that moment. I needed space to think, to process what had happened, to decide what to do next. She grabbed some clothes, toiletries, and important documents. As she was closing her suitcase, she heard the front door open. It was Maria, Tommy's nanny, returning from the boy's grandmother's house. "Hello, Mrs. Williams, how was graduation?" asked Maria, a 50-year-old Mexican woman who had been taking care of Tommy for 3 years. "That was interesting, Maria. Thank you for asking," Grace replied, coming down the stairs with her suitcase. Tommy ran to hug her. "Mom, are you a real lawyer now?" "Yes, my love. Now I'm a real lawyer," said Grace, hugging her son tightly. "Tommy, how about we go to a hotel tonight, like a special adventure?" The boy's eyes lit up. "Seriously, with a pool?" "With swimming pool," he confirmed, Grace smiling for the first time that day. Maria seemed confused. "Mrs. Williams, is everything all right? Does Mr. Ethan know you're going out?" "Maria, don't worry. You can take these days off. I'll take Tommy with me and, well, Ethan is at the hospital with his sister. She had the baby today." Grace didn't exactly lie, but she didn't explain the whole situation either. She helped Tommy pack a bag with his favorite things, some toys, his Spider-Man pajamas, and his teddy bear. While Tommy hurried around the room choosing what to take, Grace looked around the house that had been her home for 8 years. Every corner held memories. The table where she studied late into the night, the kitchen where she prepared the family's breakfast every morning, the living room where they watched movies on weekends. But at that moment, the house felt strange, as if it no longer belonged there. Ethan's absence at graduation had broken something fundamental in their relationship, and the message demanding money had been the last straw. "I'm ready, Mom," Tommy announced, appearing in the doorway with his backpack on his back. Grace grabbed the keys to the spare car and left the house with her son. As she drove through the streets of Boston toward the Four Seasons Hotel downtown, she felt a strange mix of fear and freedom. For the first time in years, she was making an important decision without consulting Ethan, without considering what he would think or say. His phone, which was on silent, displayed 50 missed calls from Ethan and several unread messages. But Grace kept her eyes on the road, focused on the immediate future. A hotel room, a pool for Tommy, and time to think about what to do next. When they arrived at the hotel, Tommy was mesmerized by the elegant lobby and crystal chandeliers. Grace checked into a suite overlooking Boston Common, and while Tommy explored the new room, she finally turned on her phone and read Ethan's messages. The first few were confused and irritated. "Why aren't you answering? Grace, this is ridiculous. You're being childish." The last ones were more desperate. "Where are you? Maria said you went out with Tommy. Grace, please call me." But in none of the messages had he mentioned graduation. In none had he apologized for not being there. And in none had he questioned his own demand for the $5,000. Grace looked out the hotel window at the trees of Boston Common and made a decision that would change her life forever. She took out the business card she'd kept in her wallet for months. Marcus Thompson, a lawyer specializing in family law. It was time to find out exactly what her rights and options were. The next morning, Grace woke up early in the suite. Tommy was still fast asleep in the bed next to hers, hugging his teddy bear. She had spent the entire night thinking, planning, making decisions that had seemed unthinkable 24 hours earlier. Grace grabbed her laptop and settled at the small table near the window. The view of Boston Common was beautiful that morning, but she barely noticed. Her mind was focused on one thing: discovering the truth about her marriage and protecting her future and Tommy's. She opened her browser and searched for Marcus Thompson's office. She had met the lawyer at a family law conference during her senior year at Harvard. Marcus was known for being ruthless in divorce cases, especially when it came to protecting the rights of women and children. At exactly 8 o'clock, Grace called the office. "Marcus Thompson's office, good morning." A secretary answered with a professional voice. "Good morning, my name is Grace Williams. I would like to schedule an urgent appointment with Mr. Thompson. It's about a divorce case. Let me check his schedule. We have an opening today at 2 in the afternoon. Would that be possible?" "Perfect, I'll be there." Grace hung up and felt a mixture of relief and nervousness. There was no turning back now. She gently woke Tommy, and they had breakfast at the hotel restaurant. The boy was excited about the adventure and didn't ask many questions about why they were at the hotel or where his dad was. At 2 o'clock, Grace was sitting in Marcus Thompson's elegant office on Newbury Street. The lawyer was a 45-year-old man with grey hair, gold-rimmed glasses, and a penetrating gaze that inspired confidence. "Grace, it's a pleasure to see you again. Congratulations on your graduation from Harvard. I heard you graduated magna cum laude." "Impressive," said Marcus, shaking her hand. "Thank you, Marcus, although graduation wasn't exactly what I expected." Grace told the whole story: Ethan's absence from graduation, the demand for $5,000, the growing feeling that something was very wrong in their marriage. Marcus listened attentively, making occasional notes. "Grace, based on what you've told me, I recommend we do 2 things immediately. First, let's file for divorce. Second, and perhaps more importantly, let's conduct a thorough investigation of your husband's finances over the past 2 years." "Investigation? Do you think he's hiding something?" "In my experience, when a spouse starts making strange financial demands and shows disrespect for the partner's important life achievements, there's usually more to the story. Let's uncover the truth." Marcus explained the process. They would hire a private investigator to track Ethan's financial movements, his recent activities, and anything else that might be relevant to the divorce proceedings. "How long will this take?" Grace asked. "With the right resources, we can have preliminary information in 48 hours. Complete information in a week." Grace signed the necessary papers and authorized the investigation. When she left Marcus's office, she felt strangely empowered. For the first time in years, she was taking control of her own life. Back at the hotel, Grace found 23 missed calls from Ethan and a series of increasingly desperate messages. The first ones were still angry and demanding. "Grace, this has gone too far. Go home now. You're being completely irrational. Rebecca needed me. Where the hell are you with my son?" But the most recent messages showed a different tone. "Grace, please, let's talk. We can work this out. I'm worried about you and Tommy. At least tell me you're okay. Grace, I love you. I don't understand why you're doing this." Grace didn't respond to any of the messages. Instead, she took Tommy to the hotel pool and tried to maintain normalcy for the boy. They swam, played, and Grace even managed to relax for a few hours. The next morning, Marcus called. "Grace, you need to come to my office. Now, we've found something." The urgent tone in his voice made Grace's heart race. She left Tommy with the hotel nanny and rushed to Marcus's office. "Sit down, Grace," Marcus said with a serious expression. "What I'm about to tell you will be difficult to hear." He placed a folder on the table. "Our investigator worked all night. Ethan has a mistress, Grace, and it's not something recent." Grace felt the world spin around her. Even though she suspected something was wrong, hearing the confirmation was like being struck by lightning. "How long has it been?" she managed to ask. "At least 6 months, possibly more. Her name is Scarlett Morrison." "Morrison. That name sounds familiar." "She should. She's the daughter of Senator William Morrison. 28 years old, graduated in political science from Georgetown, works as a political consultant." Marcus opened the folder and showed the evidence. Photos of Ethan and Scarlett entering and leaving expensive restaurants, records from an apartment Ethan had rented in Back Bay, bank statements showing exorbitant spending on jewelry, hotels, and travel. "He spent over $30,000 on her in the last 6 months, Grace. Money that came from your joint accounts." Grace looked at the photos with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Scarlett was beautiful, blonde, elegant, with the kind of sophistication that came from a privileged life. In the photos, she and Ethan seemed completely at ease together as an established couple. "There's more," Marcus continued. "Yesterday, when Ethan said he was at the hospital with his sister, he was lying. Rebecca did have the baby, but Ethan spent most of the day at the apartment with Scarlett. Our investigator has videos of him entering the building at 11 a.m., exactly the time you were receiving your diploma." The betrayal was even worse than Grace had imagined. Ethan had not only chosen not to be present at her graduation, he had chosen to be with another woman. "And what about the $5,000? Grace asked, though she already suspected the answer. Scarlett was admitted to the same hospital as Rebecca, not to give birth but for an indisposition, probably something related to food. The money Ethan wanted you to transfer wasn't for Rebecca, it was to cover Scarlett's private medical expenses." Grace closed her eyes, trying to process the magnitude of the betrayal. Ethan not only had a mistress, he was using family money to support her, and he had used the birth of his nephew as an excuse to be with her on the most important day of Grace's career. "There's one more thing, Grace, and this is perhaps the worst of all." Marcus showed a series of text messages that the investigator had managed to recover. Ethan's family knows about Scarlett. All of them. His mother-in-law Eleanor knows. Rebecca knows. They not only know, but they approve of the relationship. How can they approve it? They see Scarlett as an opportunity. Her father is an influential senator. They believe the relationship could bring political and social benefits to the Williams family. Grace felt nauseous. The family she had considered her own for 8 years, who had welcomed Tommy as a grandson, who had pretended to support her during her college years, was conspiring against her. "Did Eleanor know that Ethan wouldn't be at my graduation?" Grace asked, remembering her mother-in-law's apparent affection the day before. Not only did he know, but he helped plan it. The emergency birth was orchestrated to give Ethan a plausible excuse for not attending his graduation. Grace stood up from her chair and walked to the window. Down below, people went about their normal lives, unaware that her world had just completely crumbled. "Grace," Marcus said softly, "I know this is devastating, but now we have all the cards on the table, and with this evidence we can ensure that you emerge from this situation in a very strong position." Grace turned to him, and Marcus saw something new in her eyes. It was no longer pain or confusion. It was cold, calculated determination. "Marcus, I want you to destroy his life. Legally, of course. But I want him to lose everything." "That can be arranged," Marcus replied with a grim smile. "Let's get started right away." Grace spent the next 3 days at the hotel, immersed in an investigation that revealed ever deeper layers of betrayal and manipulation. Marcus had mobilized a full team, private investigators, forensic technology specialists, and financial analysts. What they uncovered painted an even more sordid picture than Grace had imagined. On Wednesday morning, Marcus called, his voice sounding urgent. "Grace, I need you to come to the office immediately. We have information that will change everything." When Grace arrived, she found Marcus with 2 investigators, Sarah Chen, a forensic technology specialist, and Robert Martinez, a former Boston police detective who now worked as a private investigator. "Grace, sit down," Marcus said. "What we've uncovered in the last 72 hours goes beyond a simple marital betrayal. We're talking about an orchestrated family conspiracy." Sarah opened her laptop and showed a series of messages recovered from the Williams family's phones and computers. "We were able to access communications between Ethan, his mother Eleanor, and his sister Rebecca from the last 8 months, Sarah explained. "What we found is shocking." The first message was from Eleanor to Ethan, dated September of the previous year. "Son, you need to think about your future. Grace is too focused on her career and neglecting her family. Scarlett would be a much more suitable partner for your ambitions. Her father can open doors that Grace will never be able to." Grace felt her blood run cold. September was exactly when she had started her final year at Harvard, when she was most dedicated to her studies. "There's more," Sarah continued, showing a conversation between Rebecca and Ethan. "Ethan, you know I never liked Grace. She always thought she was superior to us because she was at Harvard. Scarlett is from our social class. She understands how things work in our world." Robert Martinez leaned forward. "Grace, they not only knew about the affair, they actively encouraged it. We found evidence that Eleanor even introduced Scarlett to Ethan at a charity event last year." "Eleanor introduced my replacement to my own husband?" Grace asked, incredulous. "Not only did she introduce them, she facilitated the meetings," Marcus replied. "She offered the family's country house in Cape Cod for their dates. She paid for dinners. She even gave family jewels for Ethan to give to Scarlett." Grace remembered Eleanor's jewelry, antique and valuable pieces that she had always admired. Her mother-in-law used to say that one day they would belong to Grace, as was the family tradition. Sarah presented further evidence. "Here is a particularly revealing conversation between Eleanor and Rebecca from 2 weeks ago." Eleanor's message read, "Grace's graduation is coming up. It's the perfect opportunity for Ethan to show where his true priorities lie. If he chooses to stay with Scarlett instead of going to the ceremony, Grace will get the message. Rebecca had replied, "Perfect. And if she gets angry, we can use this as evidence that she's unstable and unfit to be a mother. This will help Ethan get custody of Tommy when they get divorced." Grace felt as if she had been slapped. Were they planning to take my son away from me? Apparently, yes, Marcus confirmed. But there's more. Robert, show her what we've discovered about the finances. Robert opened a folder full of documents. Grace, Ethan not only spent $30,000 on Scarlett, but he also transferred $50,000 from your savings account to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. $50,000? But that was our emergency fund. Exactly. And there's more. He took out a second mortgage on the house without your knowledge, using forged documents with your signature. Grace stood up, pacing around the room. How is this possible? I would have to sign the documents. He forged his signature, Robert explained. We have evidence that he practiced his signature multiple times. We found the drafts in his office. Sarah showed more messages. Here's proof that the whole family was involved in the financial scheme. Eleanor knew about the second mortgage and even suggested that Ethan secretly sell some of your shares. A message from Eleanor to Ethan read, "Son, you need to secure resources for your new life with Scarlett. Grace doesn't deserve half of what you've built together. She only cares about her career." Grace sat down again, trying to process the magnitude of the betrayal. It wasn't just her husband who had betrayed her. It was the entire family she had considered her own for 8 years. "And what about graduation day?" Grace asked. "Did you find out any more details?" Marcus opened another folder. "Yes, and this is perhaps the cruelest part of the whole story. Rebecca wasn't actually in labor when Ethan left the house. Like this. The baby was born on Tuesday, not Monday. Rebecca was at the hospital on Monday only for routine checkups. Ethan used that as an excuse to meet Scarlett. Sarah showed the hospital records. Scarlett was admitted to the same hospital. Ethan stayed with her, helping her with her recovery. So while I was receiving my diploma alone, he was busy with his mistress's recovery." "Exactly," Marcus confirmed. "And there's more. We found messages between Scarlett and Ethan from that day." Sarah read the messages aloud. Scarlett, "Honey, thank you for being here with me. I know your wife had something planned today, but you chose to stay with me. That proves you truly love me." Ethan, "Grace will understand. She always understands. You're my priority now." Grace closed her eyes, feeling a mixture of anger and disgust. The coldness with which Ethan had discarded 8 years of marriage was astonishing. "There's one last thing," Robert said. "We've discovered what their final plan was." He showed a series of messages between Ethan and Scarlett from the last 2 weeks. They were planning for Ethan to file for divorce right after his graduation. The idea was that he would claim incompatibility, that you had become too ambitious and neglectful of the family. Scarlett had already spoken to her father about getting Ethan a job in the senator's office. And about Tommy. They wanted joint custody, but with Ethan as the primary guardian. The claim would be that you were too focused on your career to be a proper mother. Grace felt a cold, calculated rage taking hold of her body. They hadn't just planned to destroy her marriage, they had planned to destroy her relationship with her son. "Marcus," Grace said in a voice she didn't recognize, "I want you to use all this evidence. I want Ethan to lose everything. The house, the money, and especially any chance of keeping my son. Grace, with this evidence, we can not only ensure that you retain full custody of Tommy, but also secure a very favorable division of assets for you. We're talking about at least 70% of the couple's assets. And what about the money he hid? We're going to recover everything. Marital fraud, document forgery, unauthorized transfers. Ethan could even face criminal charges." Grace looked out the office window, watching people strolling down Newbury Street. A week ago, she had been a devoted wife and loving mother, celebrating her graduation from Harvard. Now she discovered that her entire life had been a carefully orchestrated lie. But instead of feeling destroyed, Grace felt something different growing inside her. It was power. It was determination. It was the certainty that she would no longer be the victim in this story. "Marcus, I want you to file for divorce today, and I want Ethan to be completely taken by surprise." "That can be arranged," Marcus replied with a smile. "In fact, I have an idea that will make it even more satisfying." Grace leaned forward, ready to hear the plan that would change her life forever. Marcus had planned everything down to the smallest detail. On Friday morning, exactly 1 week after Grace's graduation, Ethan would be served the divorce papers in his office, in front of all his colleagues. But that was just the beginning. "Grace, let's do this in a way he'll never forget." Marcus said, finalizing the last details. First, the divorce papers. Then, a court order freezing all joint accounts. Next, a lawsuit for spousal fraud. And finally, we'll expose the whole truth to the person who matters most, Scarlett Morrison. Grace was at the hotel getting Tommy's things ready for breakfast when her phone rang. It was Marcus. "It's done, Grace. Ethan has just been served, and our special surprise for Scarlett is being delivered right now." The special surprise was a complete dossier with all the evidence of Ethan's betrayal, including financial records showing that he was bankrupt. Marcus had discovered that Ethan had lied to Scarlett about his financial situation, making her believe he was much richer than he actually was. 2 hours later, Grace's phone began ringing incessantly. It was Ethan, but this time she answered. "Grace, what the hell did you do?" he yelled from the other end of the line. "You humiliated me in front of the whole office." "Ah, Ethan," Grace said with an icy calm she didn't know she possessed. "Finally you call. I thought you were too busy looking after your mistress to remember you have a wife. How are you?" "Grace, can we talk about this? It didn't need to come to this. Wasn't that necessary?" "Ethan, you forged my signature, stole $50,000 from our account, spent $30,000 on your mistress, and plotted to take my son away from me. At what point exactly do you think that would be appropriate?" There was silence on the other end of the line. Grace could hear Ethan breathing heavily. "Grace, I can explain everything. Scarlett, it was a mistake. I was confused. You were always studying. I felt neglected. Spare me the excuses, Ethan. I know everything. I know your whole family was involved. I know you planned this months ago. I know you lied about my graduation day to be with her. My family has nothing to do with this. Your mother introduced Scarlett to you, Ethan. Your sister helped plan your lies. They wanted to take Tommy away from me. Do you really think I'm stupid?" Grace heard a noise in the background. It sounded like someone was yelling at Ethan. "Ethan, it looks like you have a visitor," said Grace, smiling for the first time in days. "Grace, please don't do this. We can work everything out. I'll break up with Scarlett. I'll give the money back." "Too late. By the way, how's your financial situation? I heard Scarlett wasn't too happy to find out you're broke." "How do you know about—" "Ethan, do you really think I wouldn't be able to find out the truth?" Grace hung up the phone and felt lighter than she had in months. Tommy was watching cartoons on TV, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding around him. 3 hours later, Marcus called with updates. "Grace, you won't believe what happened. Scarlett went to Ethan's office and made a public scene. She yelled at him in front of all his colleagues, calling him a liar and a con artist. Then she called her father. And what did Senator Morrison do? He immediately cancelled any possibility of Ethan working for him. In fact, he is considering a defamation lawsuit, since Ethan had presented himself as a successful and financially stable lawyer." Grace smiled. Ethan's fall was proving even more spectacular than she had imagined. "There's more," Marcus continued. "Eleanor called you. She wants to talk." "My ex-mother-in-law? What does she want?" "Apparently she's desperate. With Scarlett out of the picture and Ethan ruined, she realized she's lost not only you but also access to Tommy." Grace thought for a moment. "Tell her I have nothing to say to her. She made her choice when she decided to conspire against me." In the following days, Ethan's situation continued to deteriorate. The financial investigation revealed even more irregularities, and he was fired from the law firm where he worked. Scarlett had not only abandoned him, but was also spreading rumors throughout Boston's social elite that he was a liar and a cheat. On the other hand, a month after the trial, Grace was thriving. With 70% of the couple's assets, she bought a beautiful house in Cambridge near Harvard, where she had landed a job at a prestigious law firm. Tommy adapted quickly to his new life, especially since he now had a more present mother, and happy. 6 months later, Grace was in her new office when she received an unexpected call. It was Rebecca. "Grace, I wanted to apologize," said the former sister-in-law in a hesitant voice. "Rebecca, you helped plan the destruction of my marriage. You wanted to take my son away from me. Why should I listen to your excuses? Because I was wrong, completely wrong. Ethan is living in a tiny apartment, working in a second-rate office. Scarlett publicly humiliated him, and now no one from our social class wants to talk to him. My mother is devastated because she lost her grandson." Grace listened in silence. "Grace, you've always been good to our family. You took care of Mom when she was sick. You were always kind to me even when I didn't deserve it. We destroyed everything because of greed and prejudice. Rebecca, I appreciate your apology, but some things can't be undone. You not only betrayed my trust, you tried to destroy my relationship with my son. I know, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. Grace hung up the phone and looked out the window of her office. Down below, people walked the streets of Cambridge, each with their own stories, their own challenges. She thought of Ethan, probably alone in his small apartment, reflecting on how his greed and arrogance had destroyed everything. She thought of Eleanor, who had lost not only a daughter-in-law but also access to the grandson she adored. She thought of Scarlett, who had discovered in the worst possible way that not every married man who promises to leave his wife is trustworthy. But mostly, Grace thought about herself. A year ago, she was a woman who put everyone else's needs before her own, who accepted being neglected and disrespected in the name of family harmony, who doubted her own worth and abilities. Now she was a successful lawyer, a loving and happy mother, and a woman who knew exactly her worth. She had learned that sometimes, when people show their true colors, the best thing you can do is believe them and act accordingly. Tommy rushed into his office. Grace had picked him up from school, and he loved spending his afternoons in her office, doing his homework while she worked. "Mum, can I draw on your desk?" "Of course, my love," said Grace, hugging her son. "You can draw whatever you want." While Tommy focused on his drawing, Grace returned to work. She had important cases to review, clients to attend to, a career to build. But more important than all of that, she had a new life to live. A life where she was valued, respected, and loved for who she truly was. Revenge had been sweet, but freedom was even better. Did you enjoy this story of overcoming adversity and revenge? Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which city or state you're watching from. Your interaction is very important to us.